When I was a kid, before we moved to Texas, we lived in a house in Georgia with a vast backyard that made me feel like the most popular kid in class whenever we played outside games or did sports. Because we had a 2-acre property, my backyard would be the place to go. On 3 sides, the backyard was bordered by woods. It also had a trampoline in one corner, a hot tub, an oversized attached 3-car garage, and an above-ground pool. We had everything you could want in a backyard for a middle-class neighborhood. There was enough open grass to play soccer, baseball, football, or anything else. We even played hide-and-seek tag, or manhunts, as we called it back then. My buddies and I wanted to hold a campout sleepover in my backyard one Friday in the 6th school. Mike, another Mike who I'll call Michael, and Jason were there. Of course, we had to ask permission from our parents, but we were only 11 or 12, and it was a Friday. There was no reason for either of our parents to say no. In addition, my family possessed a lot of camping gear, including 2 tents that could comfortably hold 2 of us each. We made plans for them to be at my house at about 5 o'clock, so we could play sports in the backyard once we had permission from our parents. We had so many soccer nets in the yard that we had to play 2-on-2 soccer. We did that for about a half hour, then played baseball for another half hour. My dad ordered pizza for us after we sat for a few minutes collecting our energy, so we ate around 6:30 or 7. The sun was dropping a little earlier, so it was time to set up the tents before it got too dark, because I was a Boy Scout and we had only recently learned how to set up tents. I was excellent at it. My buddies assisted in specific ways, but I did most of the work. It was getting dark by the time they finished. The backyard lights were turned on, casting a pleasant glow. We could now play our favorite game, manhunts, because it was dark enough. In the backyard, there were a million places to hide. We played in groups of 2. Mike and I would be hiding first, followed by Michael and Jason. Mike and I broke up. Our goal was to return to the home base location, the house's back door. There was no camping by the door. The trampoline was near the woods at the furthest corner of the yard. I crawled beneath it to hide. When the hunters began searching, they had to blow a whistle to alert the hiders that they were doing so. After hearing the whistle, I waited under the trampoline, watching the 2 of them look around in the distance. I waited for the right moment to approach closer to the back entrance. I set my sights on the hot tub, conveniently located next to the home. If I could get over to cover behind the hot tub, I could make a beeline for the back door. So, when Michael and Jason turned their backs to me and gazed in different parts of the backyard, I dashed towards the hot tub. Just as I ducked behind it, I heard one of the trash cans on the side of the house almost topple over. The motion-detecting light on the side was then turned on. The hot tub was near that area of the house, but it would not have activated the light. Walking around the corner to the side yard, I noticed a tall individual clothed in dark clothing walking away toward the woods. It wasn't my father who led me into the woods. I dashed over to my pals, called the game off, and then hurried to tell my father. We left and took a few minutes to glance around the woods before checking the street for suspicious cars. Nothing and nothing at all. He advised us to sleep inside tonight, which disappointed us. We went inside and just played a PlayStation game. I told my pals what I saw. A tall man strolling towards the woods on the side of the home after reportedly nearly knocking over one of our garbage cans. We discussed going outdoors and sleeping in the tents because they were already set up. What were the chances that whoever it was still out there hours later? We went back outside silently once we finished our game, so as not to wake my father. We weren't trying to hide the fact that we were going back out there, but we also didn't want to advertise it. We each had our sleeping bag. Michael and Jason shared one tent, while Mike and I shared the other. After fooling about and hollering things across tents, we began to quiet down and try to sleep. I wasn't sleeping yet, but Mike appeared to be. I heard footsteps on the grass as I approached the tent, and suddenly the tent zipper was opened. When I looked up, I noticed my father peering inside the tent. "What are you guys doing out here?" he said. I told him. They wanted to sleep out here, so we came back out. Then I focused my attention on the face staring into the tent. I realized it wasn't my father, but rather a stranger my father's age. I screamed murder like a small kid as he was about to walk in. Everyone awoke, and Mike began to cry as well. The man grabbed our ankles and told us to keep silent, but he gave up when he realized he was about to be revealed. He walked out of the tent and vanished. I instructed my companions to flee inside, and as we approached the home, my father emerged from the back door in response to our screams. I informed him that I didn't know which way he went, but the man from before had returned. My father rushed around the yard, yelling and taunting the guy to return if he had any balls. We could hear it from the living room. My mother, of course, phoned the police, and all that happened when the officer arrived was that he took my account of what happened, made a police report, and then went. It was helpful to have a police report so that the officers were aware of the presence of a creep. I'm not sure if that man ever returned to our property, or if he was ever arrested for something similar. In any case, it was a traumatic experience that could have turned out far worse. This was a couple of years ago, around 2019. I was at a friend's house. For the sake of the tale, I'll refer to her as M. I was looking forward to the sleepover because I couldn't wait to talk about all of the middle school drama. M's house was deep in the woods, which you might be interested in knowing. Deep, I mean. Forests were everywhere, and their nearest neighbor was about a half-mile distant. But behind her house was a cliff that plunged into the ocean. The night at M's residence began well. Our friend Sam was also present. We played truth or dare, hide and seek, and other adolescent activities. Even though it was getting late, we decided to walk down the gravel road leading to the other houses. We asked her mother along the way, and she said yes, so we continued walking. After another 10 to 15 minutes, we noticed a man approaching us on the street's opposite side. We didn't think much of it at first. Maybe this guy was also out for an evening stroll. But something didn't seem right about this man being dressed in heavy gear. That's what I mean. It almost looked like snow gear, although it was warm outside then. Out, it was around 60 degrees. We all looked at each other as we passed the person, and that's when it hit us, that horrible odor emanating from him. It was highly revolting. No words can explain the awful smell. My friend took a deep breath after we eventually got a few steps away, almost as if she had been holding it. One of my friends fled into the woods and nearly puked. We decided to return at this point because our friend, who almost puked, was asking us to. We all agreed that returning would be the best option. We passed him again on our way back. We held our breath this time before passing him. When we turned around, we noticed he was no longer traveling in the opposite direction, but was now following us. This was quite irritating. That foul-smelling individual pushed his stench even closer. We had no choice except to accelerate. We began walking quickly. We just had approximately a mile to return to M's place. The strange, disgusting-smelling person increased his speed as we did. We were running at this moment, and my friend Sam looked back. We then heard it. Sam let out a blood-curdling scream as she looked back, prompting M and me to do the same. And what we witnessed still horrifies me to this day. This man was rushing at us, holding what appeared to be a knife or something sharp in his hand. Sam, and I began yelling as we raced down the road. He stopped chasing us because of our screaming and ultimately just stopped. But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring as we walked away. We didn't linger to see his intentions. Instead, we dashed back to M's place. We shut the door and decided not to tell her parents because they were already asleep. We all went to the living room to finish arranging our sleeping arrangements. A few hours had gone. It was now midnight. I can't recall what we watched, but I know it was a horror film. Now, I mentioned her house was on a cliff for a purpose. As a result, her home has many windows on the backside that overlook the vista. I was seated on one of the couches in front of the window. It was utterly black outside. All you could hear were the waves and wind. I heard footsteps outside all of a sudden. They sounded like they were standing right next to the window. I told my buddies, and M said the deer probably frequented the area. M had fed the deer at this window daily for the past 2 years. This excited me since the deer would come right up to my hand. I decided to check outside. but there was nothing to see because it was too dark. I suggested going out to pet the deer, but Em and Sam declined. They reminded me of what had happened previously, and I agreed. So, we resumed watching the movie. Another hour had passed, and we were all exhausted. We turned off the television and crawled beneath our covers. It was approximately 45 minutes later. Em and Sam were fast asleep, but I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong. I felt that I shouldn't sleep. So, I went outdoors to take a look. The moonlight was barely bright enough to glimpse the water. So, I stood outside for a few minutes, simply staring. While I was looking out the window, I noticed something moving in the trees to the left. I moved my head in that direction, but saw nothing. I knew I saw movement, so I took a flashlight off the bookshelf and shone it in the order of the action. This was perhaps the dumbest idea I'd ever had because I ended up seeing that man again. But this time, he wasn't dressed for the snow. Instead, he was shirtless, and I wasn't about to find out what else he was missing. So, I tried to rouse Em and Sam and tell them what I had seen. Sam awoke, but Em remained sound asleep. I told Sam to go outside, but when we went outside, he was gone. Sam glanced at me with a furious face as if I was teasing her. I told her I wasn't, but she wasn't convinced. She went back to bed, leaving me lying there. It was now around 4:30 night, and it was still dark outside. I didn't sleep. I was about to fall asleep when I heard a knock on the door. When I heard it, I jumped from the couch. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my curiosity won out. I moved over to the door and peered through the peephole again, but saw nothing. My mind had to be messing with me. I returned to the couch and threw my blanket over my head again. I ultimately fell asleep, but awoke in a chilly sweat at midnight. Something was wrong once more. My body wouldn't quit shaking. Then it hit me. That familiar stench, that repulsive odor. I almost puked right there, but as soon as I sat up, I heard footsteps approaching me in the grass. Nearby, approaching the tent. The tent zipper was suddenly opened. When I looked up, he was standing in the corner of the room, the man from earlier. I yelled, which woke up Em and Sam, and they also screamed. As we were doing this, the man escaped from the house. After a few minutes, Em's mother and father ran down the stairs. We informed them of everything that had occurred. Em's mother contacted the cops, while Em's father walked down the road with a shotgun, hoping to find the man. After the cops arrived and heard our stories, I returned home. When I went home, my folks didn't say anything. They hugged me for hours. I was no longer permitted to attend sleepovers after that. It wasn't until years later that I realized how horrible everything was. The cops eventually apprehended him, and inside the old shed we were daring each other to enter were 5 dead bodies. And the stink I was picking up on that man's body was the stench of decaying flesh. My pals and I would have ended up in that shed if things hadn't turned out the way they did. In Manhattan, I work in risk management for a large bank. I've met many interesting people through this job and frequently go out to happy hour with my coworkers. Sebastian, a new employee, was transferred to our office in 2019, and I met him on his first day. He appeared very gregarious and outgoing, often laughing and smiling, and rapidly became the life of the party at our office gatherings. Sebastian and I eventually became friends and began spending time together outside work. He was full of stories about his experiences, the gorgeous women he claimed to have met, and his brushes with celebrities. However, as time passed, I began to suspect that many of his stories were exaggerated, if not fake. Even though I took everything he said with a grain of salt, I still went out with him because he was pleasant to be around. One day, Sebastian asked me to his and his sister's condo in St. Pete Beach, Florida. His affluent mother owned this condo, who would not be present during our visit. Sebastian promised us a good time, so I persuaded my younger brother, Tyler, to join us. We flew to Florida on the same aircraft, and I met Sebastian's sister at the airport. She seemed a little odd, and there was something peculiar about her that I couldn't quite place. Their condo was rather lovely, with 3 bedrooms. Sebastian and his sister shared a room, while Tyler and I shared another. However, the atmosphere in the condo suddenly changed. We went to some beach bars on the first night, and Sebastian began drinking heavily and acting weirdly. He became hostile with others, improperly hit on girls, and even got into fights. It was a new aspect of him for me, and it made everyone uncomfortable. When an altercation arose, he accused me of not having his bat. Sebastian's behavior was becoming embarrassing, so Tyler and I decided to leave the bar. We ended up meeting two girls and exchanging phone numbers. When we returned to the condo and told Sebastian about it, his mood altered. He became agitated and accused us of betraying him. We heard footsteps outside our bedroom door later that night. Sebastian had been listening in on our talk, which made us uneasy. He eventually stopped listening, and we both fell asleep. I awoke in the middle of the night feeling something was amiss. Sebastian was standing outside our bedroom door, watching us. He lunged at me, hurling abuses, and attempted to choke me. Tyler had to step in and take him away from me. Sebastian accused me of gossiping about his sister behind his back and ranting about how I had ruined his life. We left the property the following day and stayed in a motel. Sebastian's strange behavior, as well as Tyler's brush with him at the bedroom door, had made us nervous. We stayed at the hotel until Sunday before flying home. Sebastian continued working at the office but avoided making eye contact or talking to me. He eventually transferred to another office, most likely due to the strained relationship generated by that weird weekend. Sebastian initially appeared calm and ordinary, but he became tormented and unstable. That night in his condo had been terrible, so I was relieved when he left our office. Things in my office returned to normal after Sebastian was relocated to a different office. Although the unsettling recollections of that weekend faded, I couldn't help but wonder what had prompted Sebastian's unpredictable and strange conduct. He had severe issues, and I hoped he would get the required care. Life went on as usual, and I concentrated on my career and spending time with my friends and family. The event with Sebastian served as a stark reminder of the importance of being vigilant about who we allow into our lives and trusting our instincts when something doesn't feel right. I also learned how important it is to take any warning flags seriously. Sebastian's acts have progressed from seemingly innocuous exaggerations and fabrications to forceful confrontations and unsettling behaviors. It was a stark reminder that not everyone is as they look on the outside, and that it's sometimes necessary to choose our safety and well-being over maintaining a friendship or social connection. I continued to enjoy my social life and career, but grew more selective about who I let into my inner circle. While Sebastian's unusual episode was brutal and disturbing, it ultimately taught me important lessons about trust, boundaries, and the value of listening to one's gut. As time passed, I hoped Sebastian would receive the assistance he required to address his underlying difficulties and recover stability in his life.